thank you for your patience and welcome Thomas Sparrow, our correspondent in Germany.
My pleasure. Nice to talk to you.
Now, we know it is a long task putting this new government together post the election. Have we seen any significant process since that very evenly split result came through?
I would say there's initial progress, especially after the two minor parties here in Germany who are said to be kingmakers. We're talking about the Greens and the Liberals met and decided that they wanted to have initial talks with the Social Democrats, who narrowly won that election on September 26th. They've had now that first three-party meeting, and it sounded all very possible, very positive, but there are many challenges ahead. There are many differences between the parties that would have to be leveled, that would have to be found compromises in order for these three parties to form a coalition here in Germany. It would be the first three-party coalition at a federal level here in Germany if they are successful.
The kingmakers, the Greens, had a particularly good result. The others, the Liberal FDPs, who will essentially be choosing between the two bigger options that they have. Again, are we learning any more about how they are leaning, or at least what they are looking for?
Well, there are main differences between the Greens and the Liberals, for example, when it comes to taxes or finances, whether the Greens would like to introduce taxes for the rich. The Liberals have said that they don't want any tax hike here in Germany at all. There are other issues, for example, climate change. There are different approaches there. They are trying to find common ground on basically all major issues. Coalition governments and coalition contracts here in Germany tend to be very, very long and very detailed. So it is expected that these talks will take some time before they come to any conclusion. And let's not forget, 4 years ago, Angela Merkel and her Conservatives took over 5 months to form a coalition back then, after many turns, many twists and turns, many problems. And experts are saying that because the result was so tight this time round, that coalition building could also be particularly difficult. But these three parties that have met, they at least have said that they're positive and that they look forward to meeting and trying to find that common ground so that Germany can have a government hopefully before Christmas.
What did the election reveal about who voted for whom?
Actually, this is very interesting that you point this, because the Liberals and the Greens had very important support among younger voters, and in particular also among first-time voters. So here in Germany, experts are also talking maybe of a generational shift, which could mean that these two smaller parties, these two kingmaker parties, could also put on the agenda topics that are very important for younger people. Climate change, for example. This is the biggest topic that we've had here in Germany in the recent years and recent times, where young people have really played a very important role. Older age groups here in Germany tended to vote for the traditional, formerly known as Big Tent parties like the Social Democrats or the Conservative Bloc. So that's why here there has been a lot of analysis in recent days after the election on what this could also mean here for Germany, if you look at it from a generational point of view, and what effect that could have in a possible coalition government looking towards the future.
Could we touch briefly on what's happened in Austria with the Chancellor Sebastian Kurz stepping down? Because I'm curious also, it's also in this coalition government construct. And are we seeing any patterns again in some of the smaller parties, whether they be the Greens or whether they be more of the right-wing or even far-right parties and their influence? What's happened in Austria?
Well, essentially what's happened in Austria is that the Chancellor, Sebastian Kurz, stepped down. There was a corruption scandal in Austria after Kurz and 9 others were placed under an investigation. There were raids at a number of locations linked to his Conservative People's Party. And although Mr. Kurz denied claims that he had used money to, for example, ensure positive coverage in a newspaper, the allegations actually led to his coalition government basically failing, at least to the brink of collapse, in particular after the junior partner, and in this case we're talking about the Greens, stressed that Mr. Kurz was no longer fit to be Chancellor. So yes, we are seeing again that in particular when there are big crises, when there are big problems, being in a coalition government can be a very tricky endeavor because minor partners, like the Greens in this case in Austria, really were instrumental in Austria's Chancellor Sebastian Kurz stepping down. It now looks very likely that the Foreign Minister, Alexander Schallenberg, will be his replacement in Austria, but it's also not good for Germany to know that the neighbor to the south is also facing a significant period of uncertainty, just as Germany here as well is facing uncertainty after the election.
Indeed it is. Now, Angela Merkel, who was a giant, still remains a giant across not only German politics of our time, but European politics of our time, she stays in place for as long as it takes, doesn't she?
That's correct. And if she stays there in power until December 17, she will also break the record as the Republic's longest-serving chancellor, surpassing Helmut Kohl, the Chancellor of Reunification. So for her, it would certainly be a very important moment, although she has also indicated that she would clearly like to see a government in place because this uncertainty is not something that basically any politician wants in Germany at the time.
Given that she had nominated her preferred successor, what do we make of the fact it's so unclear, the result? Is it seen as being her preferred successor's performance that is the issue, rather than any kind of referendum on Angela Merkel?
Absolutely, that's the case. In fact, people still view Angela Merkel in a positive light here. And one of the big problems for the CDU-CSU, so her conservative bloc, was that she was not the candidate. And the actual candidate for the CDU-CSU bloc, Armin Laschet, was always in the shadow of Angela Merkel. And that is something that experts here are stressing that could have impacted negatively the CDU-CSU result in that election. The fact that Angela Merkel still remains the party's absolute key politician,